there's a couple of things that were close and dear to me whenever I decided to actually finally go ahead and write this book, and that was that I was going to keep it personable. I wasn't going to allow it to be commercialized. I wasn't going to lose touch with my own story and it become somebody else's livelihood. So it's important to me that I get the face-to-face contact, and that I start to get to know people that I'm talking to when I do these. But have you ever been in a situation or done anything or thought about something that you experienced that you felt like that if you ever started talking about it, you would never quit crying? Well, that's what this is about. That's the reason it took me 25 years to be able to write the story. It was something I didn't want to face. It's something I didn't want to talk about. I've been married 26 years and I've known my wife 27 and a half. And there's things that she found out that she didn't know. It's a story that goes back with a lot of emotional and physical heartaches. I was born with a tremendous disability. I was born with a club foot. Well, actually club feet. Both of my feet were classified as club feet. But most people think that club feet are just turned inward. The difference in mine was that mine stopped at the ankle on my right leg. It was rotated 90 degrees, it was folded in half, and it was folded again on the back side of my leg, and parts of it was growing into the back side of my leg. When my mother went into labor, my father told her, well, just drive yourself home to the hospital. Finally, he agreed to take her to the hospital, but when he took her to the hospital, he dropped her off at the front door. He didn't return back till 4 days later. When I was born, this is a story my mom tells me, is that when I was born, at that moment in time, she knew something wasn't right, that something was wrong, because the doctors just hurriedly whisked me off into another room. And in doing so, the doctor came back to talk to her, and this is the story, or the words that he said. And he says, "Francis, I've got some bad news for you. Your son was born with club feet. One of them we can correct with braces or cast, but one of them is the worst I've ever seen. I give him about a 10% chance of ever walking. And if he does walk, he's going to walk with a limp or a cane or a walking device. That's if he's ever able to walk. But we need to get started, and we need to do something now." So 3 days after I was born, I had my first surgery. For the next 5 years, it was a surgery after surgery. I had 4 major surgeries. I had numerous procedures of cast and braces and therapy of different kinds. 4 days later after I was born, my dad shows back up at the hospital, and she tells him what happened. And at that point in time, he tells my mom that, well, Lois is not coming home with us. My dad died when I was 5. I can't tell you much about him. Very little I can remember. He was an alcoholic. He was abusive. He died from complications of a stroke, which is the same thing that got my brother that's next to me in 2006. Those early years were tough. Didn't have a father figure. Come from a very poor family. My parents worked in the cotton mill. Spent most of the time growing up by myself. My brother that tried to take on a father figure was 15 years older than I was. So by the time I got to 5 years old, he's 20. He's out in his own, he's doing his own thing. So I spent most of my time in the deer woods of Smith Station, Alabama, trying to escape the abuse and the neglect that was happening in my childhood. Spent a lot of time trying to figure out where my life was going, what I was going to do, how I was going to do it. But I also spent a lot of time talking about or thinking about, why me? What did I do to deserve this? You know, why did I have to have a leg like this? The pain was remarkable. The early years I can't remember the pain that much, but the last surgery I do remember because I beat the cast off of it. Because they put it in such a contortionist position, trying to stretch the ligaments and turn my foot. And, I remember to this day sitting in the middle of the room just beating it on the floor until I beat it off of me. Of course, the next day it was right back. So I had to endure that. This is the one of the last braces that I wore. The reason the toes are cut out of it is because we couldn't afford to buy them. Had to wear them as long as I could. But I remember the first time I tried to walk. It was because the reason I was able to even walk was because of this, because of the strength that the bars gave me in my ankle. I wore them all the way up to my first grade, my first year of school, first grade, and I remember taking them off because of the hazing and just the things I was dealing with from other kids. And I remember the pain of trying to walk without it. I named the book The Unlikeliest Auburn Tiger. And the reason that it's named that is that whenever you go through the book, there's numerous situations where if I wasn't the most unlikeliest or most unlikely football player at Auburn University, I don't know anyone else. I finally got some fun in my life, and that was playing baseball. I could play baseball, but the running was awful. I had to cheat. I had to run bases and step on the bases with my left foot. First time I tried it with my right, I went down, twisted my ankle, wound up in a cast. Coaches rode me, got onto me because I wasn't doing it right. I would never tell them why. I covered it up all my life, even up to the time I was at Auburn. I'd wear extra pair of socks. I'd wrap my ankle and half of my calf in ace bandages, trying to make the size of my right leg look like my left one. To this day, from the knee down, my leg's half the size of my left one. My foot is about almost 2 sizes smaller than my left one. I became a pretty good baseball player. It kept me out of the house. It kept me doing things that I didn't have to deal with issues at home. My brother, the middle son, the brother next to me, turned out to be just like my dad. Needless to say, the older I got, the confrontations got worse. However, I was a small gentleman at the time. 5'8", 5'7" when I went to Auburn, 160 pounds. Both of my brothers are 6'5", 225, 250. I don't know what happened. The mental anguish and the things that I thought about and the things that went through my mind during those years, I cannot even begin to express to you tonight because we don't have enough time. I put a lot of them here. The first 4 months of this book is the hardest thing I ever did. Because the way I started off this this talk is about whenever you start talking about something, you think you'd ever just not quit crying. Well, my wife's here to vouch. Those first 3 to 4 months, there was a lot of it. I did not realize how much I had pent up. I didn't realize how much I was dealing with. And it was time to make a change. And the reason one of the reasons, not the reason, but one of the reasons is because 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago now, I had a brush with mortality myself. I almost died from pneumonia. And at that point in time, I said, it's time to tell the story. I think it will make a huge difference in young kids' lives if I can just get the chance to talk to them. It's already making a difference. I've got 2 kids coming to the house next week that's read the book. One of them's using it for a literature project. One of them was diagnosed at 1.5 years with rheumatoid arthritis. It's hard for me to say. Been dealing with it since she's 16 now. Been dealing with it. Another one was playing football and dropped and fell out. An hour later, he's in surgery due to a tumor in the brain. I've got a list, 15 or 20 situations. A parent whose daughter at 10 years old had been born with a club foot was amputated at the knee down. I can relate to what these kids are dealing with. And some way, somehow, I'm going to get a chance to talk to them and make a difference. I played baseball because I could. I thought that that was going to be my way to a better life, a higher education. No one in my family had ever been to college, university, higher education. I was the first. I was batting over 400 for 3 years, sophomore, junior, senior year in high school. Averaged 15 to 22 home runs a year. Never lost a game pitching. I could play baseball pretty good. And I was a smile on my face. Ace bandage, soft cast, and everything. I'm going to play baseball. My senior year, I'm pitching a state championship game, and halfway through that game, I take and throw, and something in my shoulder tears. They tell me it's a rotator cuff. I cannot express to you my feeling at that moment when the doctor told me that. It was like everything I believed in was taken away. Another hurdle to jump, another situation to figure out how to overcome, something else to deal with. But I said I was going to still go to school. The irony in this situation is that I went out for football 3 years. 8th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade. All 3 years ended the same way. My ankle gave way. It popped, it twisted, it turned, you name it. Black and blue, ace bandages, soft cast. I was able to avoid the hard cast. Don't know how, but I spent the last time, my sophomore years, when it was really severely bad. Thought it was going to be surgery, and I spent 45 days with soft cast and crutches. Now that was a few years before the baseball incident. But, I wanted to be part of the team, so I asked could I be a manager, and I was a manager for 2 years, sophomore and junior year. And in those 2 years, I started picking up a football, waiting on the guys to come out that really played football. I remember the first time I punted a football. And the excruciating pain that I don't even know why I kept kicking it. I really don't. It hurt so bad because this is the foot that I punted it with. The one that had all of the problems, the issues. Coming into my senior year, that was fall before my senior year of baseball, I just went and asked the coach, could I just punt? Graciously, he said, sure, we'll make a special exception. I ended up making All-State. I averaged 42.5 yards. And that's the only year I ever played football. My story, if there ever was a story about divine intervention, I truly believe this is it. Because I could sit here and all these things that I'm telling you that happened that allowed me to get to where I am today, I can name just as many that reasons that I shouldn't have been. After I tore my shoulder, being a one-year wonder in high school football, I wasn't recruited. Auburn never talked to me, never called me. No major university ever, no school ever talked to me about football. The scholarships for baseball went away because I tore up my arm. But I borrowed money, did everything I could because I was going to try to get my education. I showed up to Auburn summer quarter, going through orientation. I'd never been to Auburn. I talked to some teachers, and it was right down the road. I liked Auburn, but never been there. So I'm in the auditorium. We ain't even got set down good, and the lady down front asked if there was a Lewis Colbert in here. First thing that goes through my mind is, what now? You know, hadn't even been here 30 minutes, and I'm getting called out. So I go down and I pick up a note from her. I'm walking back up the steps, and you have to visualize this because this was one of the points in my life that changed forever. I'm walking back up that auditorium steps, and I get about halfway, and I just stop. Felt like I stood there 10 minutes. And all it said was, Coach Dye wants to see you in the Coliseum. I'm trying to figure out how he knows or what it is. Come to find out, it was a friend of mine that was at a family reunion, talked to a friend of theirs, Ray Scott of Bassmasters, who knew Coach Dye, that went fishing with him, that had a conversation. Hey, my niece knows about this guy who can punt a football. When I sat down with Coach Dye, it was crazy because I must have been 10 foot tall, run a 3-flat 40 and punt a football 100 yards. But after that conversation, he still offered me a chance to walk on at Auburn University. And that day was beginning a change in my life forever. I immediately went to the equipment room. Man, I was giddy. I was happy. Walked out on the football, and that giddiness, a football field, and that giddiness went away immediately. There was 17 other kickers and punters out there. By spring, I was number 2. A-Day game, the number 1 punter punts a football. Guy returns it. He has to make a tackle. And of all things, he breaks his ankle. So I go to number 1, going into the fall of 1982. The last week of August, the Friday before opening game, Coach Dye calls me into his office. I walk in, my mom's sitting there. And needless to say, things were going through my mind that wasn't nothing good. And he offers me a scholarship. That changed my life forever. Still had a lot of work to do. My story is about mental toughness, overcoming adversity, having a desire and determination. I can sit here and tell you right now, I quit Auburn football 1,000 times. Coach Dye's off-season workouts, I get tired and I get sore thinking about them. It was 2 years into that program before anybody knew about my leg. I was ashamed of it. And I thought that it would make a difference whether I was going to be allowed to play anymore. I actually truly felt that if they knew it, that they would change their mind. Now, nobody ever said that, but that's the way I felt because of the way I grew up. That's a lot of baggage for a young man to carry around. It's about determination, desire, setting goals, just trying to make a difference in a world that really needs a difference. I am and how I accomplish this, I really don't. I do know, but it's overwhelming for me to even put into words. But I am the first four-year starter. I have made All SEC. I have made All American. I was voted to the team of the century. I have played on 6 state championship baseball teams. I've made it to the World Series twice, pitched in both of them, and won one of them. I even struggle today when I hear conversations when people start with the word "can." I really do. But up to a year and a half ago, I don't think I really pushed the issue. Alan can vouch for that. Alan and I worked together for many years. I'm a different person since I wrote this book. You know, scars remind you where you've been, but they really shouldn't define you. I let mine define me for way too long. I've got a scar on the back of my leg. It's 14 inches long. It runs about the middle of my calf all the way to the heel, and from the bottom of my heel all the way to my toes. It's been cut 4 different times. It is truly a wonder that I was able to do everything that I did at Auburn University. Once I made the football team, this running back showed up in 1982. I don't know, y'all may not know him. He didn't accomplish much. It was Bo Jackson. You know, we were great friends, and he was a blessing to me in many different ways. But one way is he pulled perfect cover for me. He got every bit of the attention, and I didn't have to deal with him. You know, I walked around, nobody saw me, except I was on the football field, but I'm too far away then. I go back and look at some of those films, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know how I punted a football like that. I've had people ask me, how do you punt a football that far and you're not that big? Hard work. A lot of weightlifting. When I got to Auburn, the weightlifting coach laughed at me. It's a true story. In 1981, he laughed at me. My bench press was maybe 135. Maybe. And I'm pushing on that one, I think. Leg press, I think I couldn't even do the minimum leg press for the football team, 350 pounds. By the time I left there, I was bench pressing over 300 and leg pressing over 1,000. And I'm here to tell you, when you turn loose of 1,000 pounds on a leg press, you know it. It's pretty scary. But that program showed me what working hard was all about. And it put mental toughness at a whole new level. Coach Dye wrote the foreword to my book, and there was 2 words that he used to describe me, and that was mentally tough. And his statement was that he didn't think he's seen anybody as mentally tough. And you know what? I probably can't disagree with him, because I put a lot of walls up to keep from dealing with stuff. I'm hoping that you know, the opportunity continues to present itself, that I get to speak to kids and groups. It's not just kids. You know, I was 46 years old whenever I decided and made a decision that I needed to tell the story and let these things go. I definitely wasn't a kid. I'm sure that I'm not the only one out there like that. It's okay to be different. I was as different as any of them on that football team. But you know what meant the most, and what took change into my life to a different level? You know what the most coddled award that I got at Auburn University as a punter? I was voted team captain in 1985, along with Bo Jackson and Harold Harlan. I should have been smart enough then to realize that people didn't look at me the way that they looked at me when I was growing up, but I didn't. I didn't figure it out. And I know that it's making a difference, because I'm here to tell you, 3 months ago when I made my first speak to a group, it didn't go well. I spent more time choking back crying than I did speaking. You know, I'm still not over everything, but I'm here today to tell you that it's getting better. And I know it can get better for people that's having the same problems. You know, there's a lot of great things out there in this world. You know, we just have to open our eyes and our heart to it. And I ended my book this way, and you know, opening your eyes and your heart to it, and doing the right things, and you don't have to worry about your feet, ironically as that might be. You know, Tennessee, we're right here in the back doors, huh? Anybody want to sing Rocky Top? I tell you, I want to.
We don't wear faded orange.
I'll tell you a story about the Tennessee game, and you know, this kind of puts things in perspective to people that may have not had an opportunity to get on a football field like that. What does the stadium hold? 101, 102,000 or more now?
Yeah, it's
Back then it was in 6 digits. I know. I remember we took a kickoff, we fumbled it, we fell down on 5-10 yard line. We ran 3 plays. Next thing you know, the ball's on the 1 or 2 yard line. And you know, this was either my first or second game against Tennessee. It looked like it was a little interesting out there. But I take the field, and I'm standing like, that's the back of the end zone, and I'm standing like right here. You know how that goes. Guess what's behind me? Student section. Rocky Top and screaming and hollering and stomping the stands was overwhelming. It was so loud and so much noise, the ground was vibrating under my feet. I looked at the ball, because I'm trying to figure out where people are coming from. I looked at the ball, and the ball's moving. It's moving across the ground. It got to vibrating so hard, my vision started jumping. Now, needless to say, I was starting to get worried because, you know, it's kind of hard catching a ball that's doing this, coming at you a knuckleball, or it looks like a knuckleball. We snap the ball. I take the steps. Next thing I know, it's 70 yards later. It got mighty quiet after that. It was some interesting times, but you know, there was an item that I learned, and a day that I learned what teamwork was all about, or what a team was, and what it meant to be on a team. And that was my first Alabama game. My first punt, an Alabama game, my first year. Now, we done played many games, right? I done been out there amongst the team for almost 2 years, but it just never really sank in until that first Alabama punt. And I went out there, and all I could hear was punt, Auburn, punt. Goes back to 71, right? 72, 71, 2. And I mean, and I'm passing guys going on the field, and Alabama people, I mean, they knew I was a freshman, that's for sure, because they were giving me a hard time. And I guess my up back, Dennis Collier, could see it in my eyes. And there's just one game that always bothered me, or I really made certain that I tried not to mess up. That was that Alabama game. You know, it even got down to the point, I don't care what I average, they're just not going to block it. He turns around and looks at me, and amongst all that noise, and I mean, it was like somebody reached over and just turned the noise switch off. And he looked at me and he said, "Lewis, just punt it like you've been doing all year. Ain't nobody getting by me." Yes, sir. And from that point on, I never worried about it again. I can honestly say I never worried about it one time after that point. And I mean, that just, you know, that's somebody reaching out, that's paying attention, recognizes the situation, and makes a difference. And we need to do a lot more of that. And that's the reason that I decided to write the book, and hopefully that I get the chance to do that with future forward. I thank y'all for letting me come. If anybody's got any questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions. None?
I gather you taught yourself.
Yes, sir, I did. There was a high school coach that showed me how to hold a football. And from that point on, I watched Ray Guy on TV, or I'd watch other people punting. I'd watch myself on film. But not to mention, my foot doesn't operate like everybody else's. If somebody took the time to study it and looked at my film, and they'd probably say, you know, you shouldn't have been able to kick a ball like that. I can't depress my foot all the way down. There's a difference of about like that. I don't have control over my foot, except I can lock it in position. It only moves slightly this way. It'll definitely roll over in a heartbeat. And you know, I spent a lot of time covering that up when I was at Auburn, and being the first one in the locker room, the last one out. But no, nobody really, you know, I never went to schools or camps or anything like that. I have the books for sale tonight. I also can be bought off my website, lewiscolbertbook.com. If you go to the website to get one, there's a blank box that comes up when you click on order now, and you can write in any inscription that say you have a friend or a particular person, that a particular situation that you would like to address. All you have to do is type in exactly, you know, what the inscription is you want put on the book. Every one of those orders comes straight to my phone.